So, hey everyone. So I want you to in the chat if you can, and when I say if you can, I mean do it in the chat. Go ahead, tell me who you are, where you're from, and what your business is. I love using you as examples when I'm like talking through different things, and it makes it a lot easier to do that if I have more information. So go ahead and put it in there. Amy knows what I'm talking about. Amy and I have been in the room together a few times, and I think I've used her business at least twice. So, so go ahead and put that information in there. And while y'all are doing that, I am going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. So I just want to clarify, I have had, I've done this accessibility workshop now a few times. The chat's over here. So if you see me looking over here, I'm looking at the chat and looking at you. But I've done this accessibility workshop a few times. And what I think happens is that people think we're going to talk about disabilities. And what I'm going to tell you is that making your website accessible, making your business accessible is not at all about being accommodating. I want us to put our capitalist hats on and say that the reason why we want to do it is because it actually does a bit more for us than simply making it more likely that we are going to get, not get sued, which is it's a whole incentive in and of itself. And so we're going to talk about some of these things and kind of how to avoid some pitfalls and things like that when it comes to accessibility, but then also how to do it or how to think of it so that it's more of a proactive business practice and less of something that people feel like they have to do because they're being told to do it by the government or by Google, which who are we kidding? It's like the government when it comes to the internet. So, okay. So thank you again for putting all your information in the chat. That really does help me. I appreciate it so much. I have a person here who's going to be dropping information in the chat whenever I mention links and things like that. So his name is Eric. Look for information from him in the chat when we're talking about the different things that are going on. I'm Lindsay. I'm the Ohio Grow with Google Digital Coach. What that means is that I have been tapped on the head by Google and told that I need to go out and educate small businesses about all of these different topics. And so that is what I'm doing. That is what I'm here for. If you want to find me, there are links now in the chat for you to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's like my favorite place, but I also hang out on Instagram. But on Instagram, I'm mostly a lurker. And so if you want to connect with me and you have like a golden retriever that you put on your Instagram all the time, let me know. And then I will like follow you back and it'll be a whole thing because that's all I do is watch like dog videos. It's a whole problem. So I have other workshops that are coming up, but the most important one right now on our radar is that we have the 5th anniversary celebration for the Google Digital Coaches program. And that is actually going to be in person here in Northeast Ohio at the Tri-C campus on August 4th. And so if you are here locally, it is completely free. There's going to be refreshments and a panel. And I have a wonderful photographer who is going to be coming and doing some I like to say she does really good photography, but what she really does is helps us to all get really good active photos of ourselves at networking events. And so if that's something you're interested in, come and show up and you will get some fabulous photos of yourself at this event because that's what we're all about. Okay, and then there is a downloadable checklist that you can use. It has all the information that is in this presentation. Of course, you all have the recording that you can go back and review, but this document here just has all that information in it so that you can use it at your leisure, also completely free. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about best practices, and we're going to talk about how to not have those best practices be, again, dependent on reaction. I don't want us to be reactionary with our accessibility. I want us to be proactive with our accessibility. So what is accessibility? Accessibility is the idea that you are going to accommodate people who are interacting with your business, period. So that is whether you can understand, perceive, or you know what's wrong or not, or what the problem, quote unquote, problem is. That is beside the point. The whole purpose of accessibility is to essentially make everything about your business useful to every other person so that you can collect as many dollars as humanly possible from everyone and not just put yourself in a position where there's certain groups of people who just can't interact with you because they don't have the ability to do so. Okay. Now, again, a lot of this is couched in terms of disability. And if we want to think of it this way, then sure, 15% of the entire world's population, 1 in 4 adults in the US, and over $6 trillion in buying power. But I like to think of it in a more holistic method, which is 100% of people will have some disability at some point. Now, whether that is a temporary disability or a permanent disability, that is a real number. So whether you break an arm or you have a detached retina and lose vision in one of your eyes, whether you are a pregnant human who now has to carry a baby around, which means that you only have utility in one arm, whether you are, there is 100% of humans are going to have some sort of quote unquote disability at some point. And so if we think of it that way, then this becomes like, obviously you're here, so I'm preaching to the choir, but this becomes an issue that we have to deal with, because if we don't, then we are going to be eliminating some portion of the population at some time for reasons that are unnecessary. Okay. So we're going to talk about universal design. Universal design, before I was ever even a marketer, universal design was something that I was very interested in. I am one of those people who has experienced temporary disability myself, and I have some other issues that mean that I am likely at some point going to be permanently disabled. And so I am super conscious of the fact that this is something that most people are going to have to deal with, but that a lot of people are not aware of. So universal design is, again, thinking about everything that you're doing in a way that is going to make it accessible to period everybody. And it also lessens your legal risk. Now, this again is something that no one wants to talk about because it's a very unpleasant thing, but making your business inaccessible does open you up to legal risk. And that is the case with your website or your in-person business. So if you have a shop or a website, having it be inaccessible actually does open you up to legal risk. So let's talk about what universal design encompasses. These are the factors that need to be included when you're thinking about the digital version of universal design. We're going to talk about each of them, so let's roll through it. But before we start, thank you, everyone. I want you to, in the chat, to tell me what this is. Just describe this nice blurry image that you see here. What is that? Go ahead. I'll wait in the chat. It's a cup of coffee on a saucer, a cup of coffee. Keep it going. What do we see? I'll drink my tea while you're talking about coffee. Now, what do you see? What's in the cup? What is this? Y'all are done. Everybody just thinks it's a cup of coffee. A blurry cup of coffee. A cup of coffee, a spoon with a saucer. Okay. So when we're talking about alt text, the whole purpose of alt text is simply to describe the image for people who are using screen readers. Now, I want you to be thinking about that. Your alt text has one job: to describe the image for people who are using a screen reader. Now, that means that everyone with their cup of coffee was actually dead on. That is exactly what you would put here to describe it, because further information, unless you're selling the spoon, like unless the spoon is something that you're on your website trying to sell people buying these tiny teaspoons, then you probably don't need to include the fact that there's a spoon. It's not useful information to people. Isn't going to change how they visualize the image. And so if the words that you use can help people visualize the image, that's all you have to do with your alt text. We think about alt text on websites because it's actually sometimes, depending on the website provider, you're going to get a prompt to actually put in alt text. But I want you to think about alt text in another format. So I'm going to go to Instagram. Y'all can still see my screen, right? Okay, one of my favorite Instagrammers that I follow is a husband and wife that have a Instagram called Roll with Cole. Cole is a young man who is a C5, C6 quadriplegic, and his wife they are an interabled couple. His wife has no physical disabilities that are visible. And in every single one of their Instagram posts, they have an image description. They have this image description because Instagram does not allow alt text, and neither do most social media platforms. But guess who's using social media? Everybody. Everybody. And what I love about the fact that they have image descriptions in every single image, and that a lot more people are starting to do this regardless of their personal disability, is that it actually does make it easier for anyone who is casually browsing to kind of understand what the purpose of the picture is for the audience itself, right? So sometimes you'll put a picture up and the picture is just there so that you can please the algorithm. And then other times the picture actually has a job, right? But if the picture has a job and you don't tell people what that job is, meaning that you don't describe it for them, then you're not actually giving the value that you could give simply by adding in that description. Has anyone else seen this? If you've seen this, put a +1 in the chat. If you've seen, not roll with Cole, but seen people using image descriptions on social media platforms. Okay, we've seen a few people doing, okay, good. I think that more of us, especially as business owners, might want to start thinking about adding this in as something we do. I would not necessarily suggest that you have to do it on every single post that you have, but I would love to see you doing it on the post where the image itself is telling a story, so that anyone who is unable to see the image actually gets the story, right? So you have to think about it like that, okay? So part of the beautiful thing about adding in alt text is that it actually does help with your SEO. If again, you are selling the spoon or you're selling the cup and the saucer, then using your alt text to actually describe what's in the image in a way that is using your words to let people know that you are selling this thing. And this works really well if you are having a product-based business, like I know some of you are. A product-based business that has images of the products, it is always useful to then add in each of the images, first of all, again, for SEO value, but also for the person who is going to be participating in this, who might need an image reader, to add in a description of every single one of those pictures. And an actual description, like African-American woman with curly hair wearing the bat wing sleeve sweater in orange. Right? So now that is a very descriptive thing that is showing someone in their mind what it is that is actually on there, right? Okay. So, and I got a question on the couple on Instagram. Is important to add the details like green sweater, blue vest. It is only as important as those things are. So just like I was saying with the spoon, it's only important to add that the spoon is in the picture if the spoon is pertinent to what you sell or what the picture is supposed to be communicating. So in this image, it isn't important that she's wearing a green sweater. It's not important that he's wearing a blue vest. It is useful to know, but it's not important, like it won't change how you see the image. Now, if you are a highly visually descriptive person and you want to add those types of things in, more power to you, but it is not going to change how someone else perceives the image, because the description of the image is about what the people are doing. So more important, right? Now let's talk about captions versus alt text. This is an issue that a lot of people run into, is that they go, oh, okay, well, I think I'm going to use my alt text and just essentially write a caption. They have two separate jobs. Your alt text is a short description, meaning it should be as small as possible, as short as possible, to get the information that needs to be conveyed out. That is it. A caption is a longer description that is going to include keywords potentially and other types of descriptions, right? So it's going to have a bunch more information so that people can, read that information. And then usually a caption is also visible versus alt text, which is invisible. So your alt text is not showing up and your caption is. Your alt text, if you are using alt text in your website, your alt text does not have to be fully formed, complete sentences, as long as the words make sense, versus a caption. It should be something that resembles a sentence and it has structure that a person can read, right? Or that visually makes sense. That's kind of going to be your difference between a caption and a alt text. You can have both. So you can have alt text on an image and you can have a caption. I believe very strongly if the image is telling a story, the image should have a caption. And then on social media, as we see here, there is a caption and then there is an image description. They are essentially two different things at this point, right? So one of them is the caption, and then the image description has a little thing that tells you exactly what the image's job is. So this is how you kind of think of it like that. They should essentially have different jobs. Let's talk about color real quick. I know that y'all probably have heard this because we're mostly adults here. There is some ridiculous portion of humans that are colorblind. Like, I think of that as a very interesting issue that we don't talk about or think about. Colorblindness is crippling if your website is bad, right? So if you have a poorly designed website where you're just out here putting color on top of color all the time, you are just making it impossible for people to read it. So if we want to make our website usable to everyone, you want to think about high contrast all day, every day. Yes, Canva will not yell at you if you create something that looks like this. They won't say, bad idea, horrible design. They won't do that. They'll let you get away with it. But your job is to say, okay, this is going to be difficult for someone to read. I need to up the contrast between these two. And I would say, as a rule of thumb, try to use full out white if you're going to use a colored background. That just resolves that problem altogether. Because if you have a colorful background, your text needs to either be black or white. Otherwise, it is going to be very difficult for people to read, depending on what the color is in the background. Other things to think about are line weight. So not just the color itself, but the weight of the lines, because if the lines are too thin and not easily distinguishable, people won't be able to tell the difference between which words are which. That is a whole other issue. Spacing of the words themselves, spacing in between the words. So what is that, kerning and that other word that I should know, but I can't remember. I know Julie uses Adobe, so you probably have an idea of what I mean. Leading, that's it. You guys knew what I was talking about. So kerning and leading. So making sure that you have appropriate amount of space between things so that your lines aren't running together, your words aren't squished together, mostly because if someone, again, going back to just humans and humans being able to interact regardless of disability, if people can't read what you wrote at a glance, they're not going to read it. Point blank, period. They're not going to read it. So if things are too tight or too squished, they're not going to read them. If the line weight is too light, or if they at a glance, and a lot of times at a glance means that they've looked and the line weight was light enough to where they'd have to do the thing with the looking over the glasses. They're not going to do that. They're just going to move on. You're not that important to them. Okay. And so we want to make it really, really easy so that whether you are the most important person in the world or not, they actually can read and understand what you wrote. Textures and patterns, dear God, avoid them unless it is completely necessary. So I know that there are some of you in here who are designers and that the products that you use have designs and patterns and things in them. That's appropriate. You should not then take that pattern and put it in the background of your website. That is going to cause distracting visuals for someone who maybe has an issue with visual distinction. And so we just don't want to create that sort of problem when it is unnecessary. And I absolutely love this example of the difference between things that are in color versus things that are in grayscale. Right? So again, thinking about those people who have difficulty with color distinction, when the color distinction is very low, or the difference between the colors is very low, meaning there's not a lot of contrast, it is virtually impossible for people to tell what those things are. So you might want to use other methods like dashes, dots, and labels so that people can tell, okay, the dot, dash, dot line, that's a different thing from the dash, dash, dash line, so that it doesn't matter what color it is. And then, yes, use those colors for people who can see the color, but you don't want to rely on the color as the thing that tells people that there's a difference, because if the person can't see the color, then they can't see the difference. And I mean, just little things like that make such a huge issue, make such a huge difference. As we mentioned before, formatting of your text, very, very important. Fortunately for us, all of the software in the internet that help you create websites, WordPress, Wix, Squarespace, There are too many to name. Every single one of them has the ability for you to determine that this thing is going to be a header, and this other thing is going to be a header 2, and this other thing is going to be a header 3. And some of them will even let you determine what those like weights are and things for those headers. Make sure that you're choosing wisely and using headers in an appropriate way, because text readers and assistive devices rely on us making the distinction. So sometimes our websites are not making enough distinction. Everything on your website is a paragraph, or everything on your website is a header, and that is not giving the text reader a distinction for it to know when to break and when to make an emphasis. It's not giving enough distinction. So making sure that you're actually distinguishing, this is actually a headline and this is actually a paragraph, makes a big, big difference for people who are using assistive technology. Okay, quick poll. How many of you are actively using I don't know if I can say the word, I don't want to get her upset in your house. The lady whose name starts with an A and ends with an A, or if you're using the Google version of that, or if you're using the Apple version of that, where you call out to the universe and ask it a question. Yeah, you knew what I was asking for, Juliana. You ask the universe a question and then some sort of speaker device in your home tells you the answer. There we go, the echo, there we go. We all know what I'm talking about. If you're using one of those devices, this is what it's reading, right? So thinking about assistive technology, again, not just for people with disabilities, but for the fact that if your website happens to get found in Google by someone who is asking the internet a question, and then the internet goes to read them your website, but your website does not have good headers and paragraphing and all those things, it's going to sound a little bit less awesome than it should, right? You want to make sure that the distinction is there. It really does make a difference, okay? It really does make a difference. Now, this is my favorite slide, probably in this whole slide deck, and it's so simple, but people do not do it. And that is adding in descriptive words for links. A lot of people will go visit this link or click here, as if those words mean anything. So make sure you say something like visit the Grow with Google homepage for free training. Now that can still be a hyperlink. And what the internet will read to the person is that this is a hyperlink, Grow with Google homepage. It will tell them that. And so you have to, but you should make the words instead of being kind of lazy with our language. This is a Google best practice that will help you get found in search so much faster. It is actually a part of my SEO workshop that I teach, just to let you know. It's one of those things that most people don't realize they should be doing that helps so much. And I would even say the secondary thing is make sure that you're including links on your website that go to other places on your website, because internal navigation within a website is one of those key factors that determines whether or not your website is going to get found in search. Okay, so making those links descriptive and then making sure that you are on purpose linking between your pages on your website and being very descriptive about how you do that. Yeah, oh my God, you are so right, Juliana. When people do that on printed documents, I am like, who are you talking to? Like, what do you not understand how paper works? Like, I can't click the paper. It's not possible. Okay, so captions and transcripts. This is another one of my favorite topics to talk about, because the internet, again, has made it so easy to create captions and transcripts. There are several different software that you can use to make this happen for you. One of them is YouTube. So if you have a video that is a video that needs a transcript or needs captions, you can upload that video to YouTube, and you can even make it unlisted and then have it generate a caption for you. You can do the same thing on Facebook. So Facebook also generates captions, and you can use one of my favorite software that people don't talk about, which is Timmy. Timmy is awesome because it essentially is like that expensive one, Rev. Everyone talks about Rev. I never use Rev because I don't need a human to read back to me my own words. I use Timmy because it costs like pennies per 0.25, 10 to 25 cents a minute. It's very, very cost effective, and it gives you a full out transcript, and it actually pre-reads errors for you. So where it thinks that it has made an error, it highlights it. Beautiful. And by the way, all the people on Rev are doing is using Timmy, literally, because it's owned by Rev. They're using Timmy, and then they're reading the transcript and then giving you the corrected version. So you can cut like $4 off of your, your price per minute by doing it yourself or handing it to someone else on your team and doing it. So, okay. So what would I use Timmy for? If I do a workshop like this, let's say, friends, this is actually exactly what I use Timmy for. Do a workshop like this. I said something genius in it, and I'm like, I need to capture that. I will use Timmy to take my little Vimeo video that we're going to get sent here, transcribe it, and then pull the little snippets from it and use them on social media. That's what I use Timmy for. But I also use Timmy for full out transcripts if I'm doing teaching videos where I want to have the transcript available as like a full out separate doc. And I let someone on my team use Timmy and then go through it, fix where I ramble and say things that no one needs to hear again. Like I have them like fix all those things. And that's just because I already have a person on my team who can do it. So you can create your own, there's automated. And then on a software like this one, you can actually create captions for yourself. So I can have captions on this document right now. Can you all see that down at the bottom where it's just putting captions in? The experience that I have had with the captions in Google Meet, and this is not even in Google Meet, this is Google Slides captions. So this is directly inside of Google Slides. My experience with this has been phenomenal. I don't think that I've not seen them make an error yet. Like you just saw there, they fixed fun into phenomenal once I finished the word. That sort of thing. It's kind of awesome. And so great, completely free. And so if you are like me, maybe a teacher, someone who does things like you talk to yourself a lot in the internet and you need someone to transcribe that, you can use Google Slides and Loom videos to have a transcript automatically created for you just while you're talking. And I think that Loom also does do transcriptions now. So if you're a Loom video person, you might also be able to get transcriptions that way as well. Automatic captions on YouTube, just like I mentioned, you can have it just automatically do it. All you have to do is toggle it on. That is, of course, if you are watching a Loom YouTube video, you can do that. Vimeo does also have automated captions. I don't know if you can export those captions. TEDx has automated captions. TikTok has automated captions. So does Instagram now. So Instagram Reels, if you are me, an Instagram first human, then you can create your video in Instagram and have it automatic caption. And I'm pretty sure everyone knows this by now, but if you are a fan of the TikTok formatting, which is definitely different from Instagram, you can record your video in TikTok and then just export it and never post it to TikTok. So in case you didn't know, you can do that. So you can create your video, create all the captions, do all the formatting, make it all TikTok-y, and then just not post it on TikTok. That's a completely legitimate behavior that lots of people are doing. And then again, if you want to open up transcripts for other people to like transcribe videos for you, you can do this in multiple ways. You can have people add translations and things like that. Me, myself personally, I'm not interested in that mess, but if you are, you have the ability to do that, okay? Now, like I said before, you can use this as a method of creating PDFs for people. So you can create some sort of text document, either a standard text document or a PDF, you know, there you go. But just the caveat so that we're clear, PDFs are not text readable for the most part. So if you share a PDF, like I shared a little document, Google Meet, did it actually say that on the screen? That's hilarious. So if you're creating a document like what I've shared with you guys earlier, that document is not accessible as a PDF. And so I actually use a software. I just love telling people about software. I obviously am not getting any money for doing this. None of these are affiliate links. So I use a software called Beacon. And what Beacon does is it creates the thing that you all saw, but then it also creates a web version of it so that I can have a PDF version that people can just download, but then I can also create a web version that is fully readable by the internet. So there you go. So now it's like creating both, and it creates them simultaneously. It gives you a link. You just determine which of the two links you want to share, whether you want to share the PDF downloadable link or the web version only. It's kind of fantastic. And they create really simple lead magnet style documents. Okay. Yes, YouTube can save you a lot of time if you use it as a caption creator. Email accessibility. I think, was it Amy? Amy mentioned earlier, email accessibility. Email accessibility is a big issue because a lot of people are out here sending email newsletters, even though you don't have any news. We can have a whole separate email conversation about that. People are sending email newsletters with lots of formatting and pictures and columns and things like that. And it's making it difficult for people to read. So if you have someone who is using an e-reader, an audio reader for their emails, one column or single column, logical order, purposeful hyperlinks that are full text, meaning that nothing that says click here or this link or anything like that. And then avoiding emojis in the subject line that are meant to say something, right? You can have an emoji in the subject line as long as the emoji is not essentially a replacement for a word, right? And so we do that sometimes where we are trying to be cute, and there's nothing wrong with being cute, but if you're being cute and it's replacing a word, then you've just made it so that it's more difficult for someone who has an assistive device to understand what it is that you've created. And when I say an assistive device, I mean an iPhone that is going to read that email to them because they asked it to. And so again, not even really thinking about this as an accessibility issue. This is just a standard behavior that most people have, is to have a device read to them. And if your thing is not readable, it makes it very difficult, right? The 60-40 image ratio, image to text, please, please, please go err on the side of 70-80% text to 20% images. Images create more problems than you all have any idea about in emails. It affects deliverability like crazy. Just avoid images unless you have to put them in. And then overusing links. So having tons of links that are sending people out of your email is going to, again, impact the likelihood that they're going to get delivered. So it's going to change your deliverability, but it also makes it less readable for an assistive reading device. Having super small font, everybody's reading on something this size or smaller, as my phone's huge and it's not even that big. So they're reading on something really small. Make your text really big so that they can simply see it, because people are dumb. And so they're going to open up the email, and if they can't read it, they will just swipe away versus just, like spreading the screen and making it bigger. Or like Eileen was doing there, the toggling of the eyeglasses. Most people aren't going to go through that kind of effort. If they can't just see it, they're not going to read it, right? And then avoid using visual clues. Oh my God, color-based clues. I do it for clients sometimes. They're like, make that section green. And I'm like, oh God. And what they're trying to do there is develop some sort of, oh, this is important. You know what? You can also call a section call to action at the top, like make a header that says, this is important. And then people will just scroll down to that section and read it. I love a good too long didn't read at the top that just summarizes the whole email. Oh, it's fantastic. But don't use color cues because they make it very difficult for people. Okay. And then if you're going to include any sort of video, making sure that that video that you're linking to does have closed captions. Very, very important. Now, best practices when it comes to physical space. So universal design is, a lot of times when people think of universal design, they think of it as an ADA physical space first situation. Obviously, we're mostly talking about websites and web-based tools, emails, things like that. But if you have a physical space, or if you are having an event in a physical space, you do want to make sure that you are removing as many obstacles in that space as possible. You want to consider, if you are having tables, whether or not there's room at some tables somewhere for someone to roll up in a wheelchair. I also like to think, if you have maybe difficulty with the mental transition between what's wheelchair accessible and what's not wheelchair accessible, probably everyone in here has had to deal with a stroller at some point. That's your sign. Whatever you would have had difficulty with a stroller is not wheelchair accessible. That's it. That's like it's the best shorthand on the planet for whether or not someone can actually access your thing. And so again, if you walk into a space and you think, if I needed to get to the second floor with a stroller, could I? Yeah, when I walk into a space, if I needed to get to the room that I'm hosting this event in, could I do it with a stroller? And if the answer is no, you need to move something, make accommodations, because if you couldn't, it's again, thinking about it like grand, capital A accessibility, I think is very important, but I like to think of lowercase a accessibility because the majority of us are going to have to deal with lowercase a accessibility issues at some point. And as someone who has had to take a stroller down to nothing and take the baby out and put it in that enormously heavy arm thing that you're like, who is this meant for? This child is already 30 pounds. And then you're carrying that. And then this thing itself weighs 30 pounds. And then you still have to drag the damn stroller. No, like, let's just make things more accessible so that we don't have to do that. Okay. Just everybody. There are, of course, regulations and compliance if you have a physical space. I think most of us are probably not in a position where we ourselves are dealing with a permanent physical space. But if you even have, like I said, a temporary physical space, what does that look like? And then how welcoming is that space to service animals and other types of things that might be a part of someone's assisted life, right? Assisted life, okay? And no one wants to juggle all that. It's so true. It's so true. Okay. And then when you do these things, once you think through them and you do them, publicize it. Now, this is the capitalist in me. Publicize it because people like to feel accommodated even if they don't need it. Right? So we all want to feel accommodated and we want to, it's like, that thing that we all hate, virtue signaling. It's like that, but better because it's like real. So it's like, if you virtue signal after you've actually done the thing that was you were supposed to do, which is to make your space accessible, tell people about it. Please do. And then the same thing with your digital spaces. Once you have made your digital spaces accessible, I would make sure you're adding an accessibility statement on your website because it does make it easier for you to not be sued. We'll talk about that at the end. Okay, so being inclusive. One of my absolute favorite things about inclusivity, again, thinking lowercase a instead of uppercase a, is that it makes it so much easier for the crowd to love you. So if you're speaking in an accessible manner, it means not making assumptions. I am the queen of assumptions. I went through 50+% of my life just making assumptions about everybody. I'm like, it was horrible. I went to grad school and because I'm an idiot, I just assumed everyone in my cohort was the same age as me. That was a completely inaccurate statement. I assumed that everyone was renters. I assumed that everyone had $0 to their name like I did. I just made all these assumptions about people because I'm like, everyone's like me, right? Except for that was wrong. That was a very inaccurate thing. And it caused me lots of hilarious embarrassment. Very fortunately, I'm like super easy to overcome embarrassment, but I was embarrassed a lot in graduate school because I made assumptions constantly. Don't assume. And if you are going to assume, I should say, be conscious of your assumptions because assumptions are a good way to navigate the world. Like it's easier if you make a few assumptions, but when you are making those assumptions, you might want to, like, if you're in a room full of people who appear to be women, it is okay to make she assumptions, but then you can clarify and say, I'm going to say she as shorthand, but if there are any theys or hims, feel free to let me know. Like that is an inclusive thing. So you can say, I'm a she all day, but if you have something else you'd like for me to call you, just let me know. I assume constantly about how to say people's names because I would rather err on the side of calling you by your name than to just say, well, I don't know what those letters mean, so I'm not going to say anything. People would rather you try. So try, make the assumption as long as you acknowledge that you're making an assumption and that you could be wrong, okay? Try to speak as normally as possible, especially when you're dealing with people who have hearing disabilities or any other visual or auditory disability, because they're constantly being yelled at because people are stupid. And so like we're all like yelling at people who don't speak English well. We're yelling at people who say they can't hear well. We're yelling at people who say they can't hear well. We're just yelling all the time. And so speak normally. even if you have to throttle yourself down a notch and speak even lower than you normally would. I have someone who is one of my scholars in a class that I teach on a weekly basis. He's deaf in one of his ears. And so I use his body as a visual clue, and whichever direction he points himself in, I speak towards that ear, but I speak quietly, like I speak at a regular normal pace or normal volume towards the body part that he points at me, because I know that he knows which ear is the right one. I don't. But I know that he's going to do that. So I let his body be my visual clue. Maybe even try to acknowledge that there are people out there doing that right now that don't want to call out that they're deaf. So watch people, especially if you interact with them regularly. Okay. If you're not sure, ask. And then whenever humanly possible, respect people. This is a problem mostly because sometimes respecting one person is going to cause disrespect to a different person. And so again, I try to be as inclusive with language as possible and let everyone know this is the effort that is being made. And then in this effort, I may make error. Let me know if I'm making an error going too far in one direction or another. It's just how to be as much as possible in, I don't think that there's anything fractious about our times in particular, but I'm also Black. So, whenever people are like, oh, times are so hard. And I'm like, y'all obviously ain't Black. Times just been hard. But I understand where people are coming from when they say that. They mean that now they're having to think about their language and having to think about their behavior. And I get it. And I really am empathetic about it. And I am doing the same work. So as long as we're doing the work together, it really will it'll go a long way. Okay. Tons and tons and tons of resources around accessibility that we have for you. These are all in that document that I shared with you earlier. So if you have any questions, download that, because this is all the links are here. These are all hilariously, these are all hyperlinks, as if you can click on them. But the hyperlinks in the document that I gave you, those are real. They are actual hyperlinks. And so if you have any questions or anything, there's lots of resources for like specific things. There's web content guidelines, there's disability support, accessibility resources, all sorts of guidance there. The guide, Eric, if you can drop that link in again, that would be great. And yes, it really does make people think more highly of you. It honestly does. Even if they themselves are not disabled, people love to feel like someone that they love would be included in your space, because we all love someone who has some sort of different ability, right? Okay. Lastly, in-person event coming up. I will take questions, but I do want you all to click the link of the survey we're going to drop into the chat. I haven't been asking this, but Google loves data. I think we all know that. And so if y'all could fill out the survey, that would be enormously helpful to me to let Google know that this type of workshop is something that you're interested in. They absolutely love it. So with that, we'll open it up to questions. I know that there's, and before I leave you with the questions, let me go to my website and share with you one thing that I learned is a fantastic best practice. Don't look at my website, it's horrible. Fantastic best practice. And that is having an accessibility statement on your website. Now, what this accessibility statement does is that it gets you out of user error issues. There are people who are in our society just litigiously seeking the opportunity to sue you. And unfortunately, if they found that your website is not accessible, they could easily win a lawsuit. And no, you should not assume that the software that you're using is making your website accessible. So you shouldn't assume that WordPress is doing that, or that Wix or Squarespace or whatever is doing that. This little statement here is a statement that says, if you are having an issue with this at all, any contents, any features, anything is not fully accessible for any disability, call our phone number or email us, and we will give you access to whatever you need in whatever format you need it. So then that relieves the pressure of me needing to like go through and try to test the website on every single accessibility marker, because there are plenty. This website is completely, I can't think of the word right now. where things size and resize on purpose. Anyway, this website does that, but responsive. There we go. This website is fully responsive, but that's not always capture everything. Like I said, some readers are going to have difficulty, things like that. So having some sort of accessibility statement on your website is very, very useful to protect you legally from people who are going to come after you potentially because they're horrible people. It has nothing to do with you, like in particular. So, okay, let's go after questions. I think this is the earliest I've ever ended. I've always tried to end at 50 so that we can get questions in, but y'all, it's hard. Okay, questions. Did I cover everything? I'm okay with it if I did. We do have, they asked me to mention this, but we do have a series coming up, another Together Digital series. So this is the end of the first series that we did. So we have another series coming up, and Juliana just put it in the chat. The next one is going to be August 31st because I'm taking off like 2 weeks in August. Yay! I had COVID last month, so I took an involuntary 2 weeks off. It was horrible. An involuntary 2 weeks followed by 2 weeks of nonstop work to recover from the fact that I was involuntarily off for 2 weeks. So now I'm taking 2 weeks on purpose because life is beautiful. Any other questions? It was helpful. Oh yeah, I forgot to ask in the chat. Tell me something that you learned before we let you go. It's something you did not know that you now know. Go ahead in the chat and tell me something you didn't know that you now know, or a takeaway, something that you think you want to do now that you are thinking about it differently. That's a good one, Amy. I keep saying, okay, so I don't do my own posting. I have my team members do it. And so it's funny because it's like makes it even easier to have them do that. But I always think I don't like adding extra work for people.
Yeah. Well, but like you said, as far as, the audience goes and, especially for our Together Digital, we try to be a very inclusive community where anyone and everyone feels seen, heard, and welcomed. And I think accessibility is a huge part of that. And I think we've talked about a lot of it in the context of websites in the past with workshops, but it never crossed my mind about social, unfortunately, I hate to say, but we're going to remedy that. So the team's already on it.
Good. Yeah, that's a good one. And I would love to, I'm going to start doing it myself because it's just so easy. It's like not even that hard to accomplish. So
yeah, it's a nice courtesy. I mean, because your site, you get the double benefit, you get the accessibility, but then you also get, better visibility of your site, better SEO. Yeah. So it's kind of a win-win, whereas social, it's just really showing your effort.
Yeah. And for some of the social platforms, the words actually matter. So like some platforms, Instagram is horrible because the words don't mean anything for the most part, but other platforms, the words actually help you get found. And so using more words to describe things is actually going to increase the likelihood that you will get found, which is
that's great.
Better.
It looks like Pam had a question too. Do you know if those toolbars on some websites that change elements of the site to be more accessible actually work? I've heard they do not because site readers can't quote unquote see them.
That is true. So I think it depends on the platform, Pam, whether or not the site reader can use the accessibility tools. And that is very unfortunate because if it were universal, it would be great, but it's going to be platform dependent. So certain platforms, yes, other platforms, no. Which ones? I have no idea. And so it's much better to just do what you can and, do what you can because there's some things that we're not going to be able to fix.
Right?
I don't think anyone should be out here going, oh, I'm going to switch my whole website to another platform. That's an effort I would not suggest you undertake. But yeah, making sure that you have at the very least an accessibility statement and the willingness to accommodate when people can't is a good way to go. Oh yeah, that's really good, Christy. And yes, no more of this click this link stuff.
That was a good one as well.
No more of that. And I'm guilty of it. I know, we all do it. No more click this link. Click here. None of that. I think I might have literally just written a thing that said click here. Then I changed it. I really did. I changed it immediately after I said click here. I was like, that's dumb. Don't do that. Where did I get my verbiage? I actually had a client who was sued. And so I got my verbiage from them because they were sued, and the person who sued them won, and their lawyer gave them an accessibility statement for their website. So I took theirs and recrafted it. So feel free to steal mine, prmresults.com. Here, matter of fact, I'll drop the link.
Yeah, just drop the link. Click this link.
Click here. And for everyone who's watching this later, they're going to be like, I hate all of you.
Links are you talking about? You know, again, that would be nice if Zoom, when the recording, would actually record the give you the option to record the chat with it. You can pull it down as text. And maybe we'll do that in our follow-up email on this for those who are watching later. I'll include a link to that text file so you can see all these. Usually I pull it down just so I can get the links that you share throughout in the chat, but yeah.
Cool. Okay, any other questions? No, well, thank you all for hanging out with me. I'll give you 7 minutes of your life back. It is always a joy. I love you. This is like the only crowd where most of the people actually have their cameras on. It's great. I can see your faces. I love all of your expressions. It's fantastic. So thank you all so much for hanging out. I hope to see you next month. Yeah, next month when we do our next series. And if you can, if you're here locally and you want to come hang out with me on the 4th in person, I would be delighted to meet you. Just walk up to me and be like, I'm Together Digital. And then I'll be like, hey.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. It was good to see you. I feel bad I missed the last two. These are always so helpful and so well thought out, but then like so much in just an hour, but I don't feel like my brain's ready to explode. So you do these so well. Thank you so much for doing these. For those of you who aren't Together Digital members, I encourage you to check us out. Our website is www.togetherindigital.com. Hey, hello to all of our members. Look forward to seeing you guys at some of our future workshops. The ones we mentioned that are in the collection are going to be talking about SEO, optimizing your energy for higher performance, which I think is like a really great kind of, it's not so, it's tactical, but it's not like working on everything else. It's working on ourselves, which I like. And the other one, what was the other one we're doing, ladies? Oh, analytics.
Yeah.
Using analytics.
My favorite topic.
So we've got some good ones coming up. I hope to see you all again soon. And thank you, Lindsay. Sorry I joined late. Thank you, Julie, for womaning the helm until I got here. Bye, ladies.
Bye, everyone.